input on the draft new OP at a later date. The details on stakeholder engagement and public consultation will be available on the town's website and on social media in the coming days, which we certainly encourage all of you to follow. So notice will also be advertised in our local news media. Staff will report back to council following the consultation period. So at this time, the draft new official plan is only being presented to both council and the public. So no decision will be made this evening by council. So with that, members of council and administration, I'd like to also ask Mr. Hillman and certainly Mr. Jeffries to now give us the rundown on the official plan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to council and anyone who might be watching outside of the the administrative body. It certainly is quite an evening for us to be able to come forward with basically a summary of the official plan and changes that exist in the draft version as compared to the existing official plans. And as council knows, there actually are still 3 active official plans that are in effect for the town, and they relate to the former municipalities. So there's been a number of years of work put into this document, and it's not really just Chad and myself. There are others in the administrative body, certainly that have had input along the way. And in fact, a number of consultants over time have done different studies that we have gleaned information from. So it is truly a team effort. And so for this evening, we'd really like to focus on, as council had asked, really what are the differences between this proposed draft document and the documents that are currently in effect in the town. We did spend some time in February reviewing, I think it was about a 40-slide PowerPoint, sort of what is the essence of the draft new official plan. So tonight's really focusing on what are some of the changes. So I think for the benefit of time, we will literally just jump right into it. When we last left council, it was late February, of course, and we had really no appreciation at that time where we would be with COVID-19. And of course, looking back on that now, things really came to a full stop in many respects here in the community and administratively on this project for a period of time. As we came out of COVID, the province of Ontario did pass a new provincial policy statement. Council will recall we had provided some input on that document earlier in 2019. And so it actually gave us time, with the assistance of both the province, the County of Essex, and to some extent the Conservation Authority, to look at the new provincial policy statement and ensure that the draft that we're bringing forward takes into account the revisions and the sort of nuances to the PPS under this current government that have been put in place. And it's called the PPS 2020. The last one was, I believe, 2014. So with that in mind, we have a draft document that is on the agenda. So we'll commence our review. And I just want to be clear that following this summary of changes, we will also review with council a proposed consultation process and a timeline within which we hope to be in a position to have council consider this document, recognizing that ultimately it is approved by the County of Essex, and they are our approval authority in this area. So the covering report that is in front of you summarizes by section some of the high-level proposed policy changes, and then it tries to compare those to some of the existing policy environment. So jumping right into section 1 of the plan, official plans characteristically have a purpose and basis section. We have, of course, updated this section of the plan. It has been a number of years for some of these official plans that exist and when they were generated and the environment they were generated in. And although, planning principles can remain somewhat consistent over time, there's nuances certainly that happen, and there are changes to our society that happen and our demographics. So in the front section of the plan, we have updated the purpose, and we've made reference to 11 discussion papers that have come before council, and in fact have gone out for public review and open houses as formulating, the basis of the document. In addition, we've provided for a more comprehensive municipal profile, looking at it through the lens of a complete and total town now, and the structure of our town and how it how it functions in relation to prior, it was 3 unique, specific, and smaller municipal entities. Most significantly, there has been an update to the population projections that are considered for this document. We have looked at those projections both from the perspective of the County of Essex is under the Planning Act, the body which assigns growth to the municipalities in our region. But we have looked at those through the lens of some updates that we've undertaken. And we've also looked at them from the perspective of the 25-year time horizon that our plan is now projecting out to. Originally, it was looking at a 20-year time horizon. So we are now in a position to have a forecast population. We're currently around 23,000 persons, and the growth anticipated over 25 years is for about 32,000 people in total. That has a number of assumptions that are underlying it. In addition, our housing forecast demands have been updated for a 25-year period, and it's projected that there is a demand for approximately an additional 4,300 housing units over 25 years. Now, we take that information and we look at it against the lands that we have available to accommodate urban development as part of the planning process. And one thing we can say for certain is that the town is in a good position in terms of the amount of land that we have, both able to accommodate urban development and from the perspective of servicing capacity to support that development. Subject to, there is some required service extensions that would have to be implemented, and we'll speak to those a little bit later. In addition to our forecasting, we look at employment land needs, and this plan, as we've discussed, also incorporates an extension to one of our employment settlement area components out in Oldcastle as well, which we'll speak to in a little bit more detail. So really the underpinning elements of the plan have been completely updated. As we proceed through the document, there is a section that's entitled Community Structure and Growth Management. And really, this is something that has become much more common in planning documents. It would not be found in any of the prior official plans that are currently in place. And the community structure plan is really a way to try and look at a municipality, and it's sort of like the skeleton of the body. It is providing the means by which things stick together and how you function as a community. So Chad, if you were to go to the community structure plan itself on the map, Schedule A. So with this, there we go. So what we're trying to do is identify and being mindful of the fact Tecumseh is very unique from the perspective of the shape of the municipality. It's a function of various political decisions that have been made over a very long period of time. So we're not dealing with sort of a core urban area that, that spans out into rural resources and so on. It's a very quite unusual, actually, municipality from the perspective of the shape. And then so planning within that context can be somewhat, can come with its own challenges. And of course, we have a major urban center, Windsor, to our west, and a significant growing municipality to our east in the Lakeshore, and further to the west in LaSalle as well. So what this plan is trying to do is just show main points that exist in the municipality, lines that connect those points, which for us consist of primarily roads and some natural corridors and trail systems, and surfaces which are comprised of neighborhoods, key employment districts, and agricultural natural areas certainly comprise a significant part of our structure as a community. The plan then proceeds on to some growth management strategies. And really the focus there is to identify that from a growth management strategy perspective, we are looking at development proceeding within our urban settlement areas. That is where we can provide the full range of services. And it's not just municipal services, water and wastewater, it's community services, it's schools, it's parks. And so you can see those as the yellow highlighted areas. So we have the Tecumseh North Settlement Area, comprised of former Tecumseh, St. Clair Beach, Tecumseh Hamlet, Oldcastle Hamlet Settlement Area, which is down just the Walker Road 401 district, and then the Maidstone Hamlet Settlement Area, which is just down in the south east portion of the community. And the growth management strategy really is looking at trying to maintain a 10-year supply of residential lands, ensuring that we have residential greenfield sites that are ready for development, but it also tiers development into recognizing we have intensification objectives that the province would like us to achieve, and we have the capacity to absorb into some of our residential areas, and certainly some higher density residential uses along our Main Street corridor. All of this is tied to adequate servicing, and that's when I say servicing, that's water, wastewater, storm facilities, and road networks, and transportation facilities as well. So the growth management strategy starts to, hang some of our decision making around logical and progressive growth that is sustainable by the municipality. And finally, if we were to go back to Chad, the planning report on page 5 of the agenda, we have identified in the official plan proposed planning principles, and there are 22 that are identified. Now, in the existing official plans, there are planning policies throughout the documents, but there really isn't an area where the plans look at, okay, what are the principles underpinning the document? So we've just highlighted a few on the screen here of the 22, and you can see there's a common theme forming: focused development in settlement areas, mixed use, compact, pedestrian oriented development is important, intensification, provide a range of housing opportunities, promote our town center Main Street area, promoting economic development, protect agricultural lands, develop sustainable multimodal transportation infrastructure. Those are some words that you would not see in the existing official plans. Ensuring universal accessibility, and there's an important section regarding climate change mitigation and adaptation. And these are, again, fairly common in our dialogue as a community, and certainly we aspire to a lot of these policies, but now they're enshrined as policies in the draft official plan for consideration. So, Mr. Mayor, and Council, that's sort of a summary of the first 2 sections of the document. I'm thinking it might be easy as we go. If there are questions, we would certainly be pleased to answer them, because Chad and I are going to try and just break the presentation up a little bit, just so it's not one person talking. So as we go, if there are any questions, Mr. Mayor, we are willing to answer them either at the end or during this procession of the presentation. I'll turn it over to Chad.
Brian, just before you go, just on the proposed policy key changes, I know something that has cropped up in some of the issues we had, but you've got the bed and breakfast establishments that are there. That would include, or would that include the Airbnbs, or are they separate issues that we have to look at in incorporating that as we move forward? Yeah, so Chad was just going to go over some of these policies, but that was intended to be the traditional bed and breakfast type of establishments. Airbnb is something that has certainly very recently come up. I think what I would suggest is that we have an opportunity to look at, from a policy perspective, what can we put in place. The big element of Airbnb, based on our current research, is that there's a licensing regime that really oversees it. But I think what we can do, prior to us being in the position where maybe months from now council's in a position to adopt, we can present some policy options for council that would fit in the official plan. Flowing from that would probably be a review of what type of regulatory environment is the municipality interested in creating. So this little piece here that Chad's about to review, a bed and breakfast, very much synonymous with our stereotypical bed and breakfast. I live in a house and guests would come in, that sort of thing. Airbnb is quite a different entity. So we certainly, Mr. Mayor, can look at that. Yeah, it's more of a, I guess, for the lack of wording, it's more of a code of conduct, where people go into these facilities, to keep the name, because a bed and breakfast are usually the resident owner is a resident, and people come in, and it's usually very quiet and very well done. Airbnb, it's you're dependent on the short-term renter to make sure they abide by the so-called rules and code of conduct within the municipality. Yeah, I think that's where we see some discrepancies and issues that crop up, in Airbnb. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you, Brian, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'll just take you through the general. Pardon me.
I said, good evening.
Okay. I'll just take you through the general development policies. Now, these are policies that don't fit neatly into other sections in the plan, and they generally pertain to all lands within the municipality for the most part. And I'll just highlight the key additions to the new official plan that you won't find in the existing official plans. And we can start with bed and breakfast establishments. We've already discussed those a bit, but there's a policy added that establishes that they're permitted subject to a zoning bylaw amendment and to criteria being met. And one of those criteria is that it be owner operated and that the owner reside in the dwelling. And I guess that's the key difference between a bed and breakfast establishment and an Airbnb. It also will limit the number of rooms, or at least it establishes that the number of rooms shall be limited for bed and breakfast establishments. And the reason that we've included this policy is we do get the odd requests for bed and breakfast in the town. So we thought it was important to reflect that in the official plan. There's a significant section related to energy conservation, climate change, and air quality. This is a policy that you won't find in older official plans. It's a fairly recent issue. And the new provincial policy statement sets out that you shall have policies pertaining to both mitigation and adaptation of climate change. So we've got a fairly lengthy policy regime surrounding climate change and energy conservation and air quality, including a reference to the town's involvement in the regional energy plan. And as you know, Mr. Mayor, as the task chair force, that's a fairly big initiative that the county and IRCA are undertaking with the assistance of the local municipalities. So that's the one important piece to the climate change policy environment. There's policies with respect to accessibility and universal design that require that development be consistent with AODA, that's Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requirements, and that development be barrier-free. We've included a policy on CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, but it's really well known as CPTED, the acronym. And this essentially is ensuring that development is designed so that communities are safe. And it centers around natural surveillance so that you don't create situations where you can't see spaces within your built environment. And that's designed to ensure that there's always eyes on those places. Urban farming is another policy that's fairly new, and it's not included in the current official plans. And those policies within the urban farming section encourage community gardens, the establishment of year-round marketplaces, and it also sets out that livestock aren't permitted with the exception of urban hens. And as council is aware, we've got a 2-year pilot program that we're in the midst of with respect to urban hens. And so there may be some changes at the end of that pilot program to this policy and to that regulatory framework. Land use compatibility is another really important section, and you'll find some cross-references to it throughout the document, especially with respect to high density and medium density development. And we included this because we're often hearing about something isn't compatible. And we keep reminding council and those that take issue with development that it doesn't have to be the same as, it just has to be harmonious, has to coexist harmoniously with surrounding lands. So this sets out the types of compatibility issues that you should have regard to when reviewing development, but then it also includes mitigation methods for ensuring that land use compatibility. And then finally, there's a new section related to human-made hazards, and this is essentially brownfield sites, and it sets out the required studies and mitigation measures for these brownfield sites throughout the municipality if development is to occur on them. So that's the general development policy section. I'll now move into the land use policy section and begin with agricultural land use policies. This section, its focus hasn't changed in that it is intended to protect the prime agricultural lands that comprise most of the land in our municipality. Some new additions include the ability to have agriculture-related uses in on-farm diversified uses. And Agricultural related uses are those uses that are farm related, commercial, and industrial uses. On-farm diversified uses are secondary to the principal use of the farm. And an example of an agricultural related use is the processing of produce from the area, farm equipment repair, or agricultural research centers. And we've got examples of those within our municipality. These types of uses will require zoning bylaw amendment. On-farm diversified uses will be permitted as of right through the zoning bylaw. And they include things like agritourism and home occupations, and they're smaller in scale and smaller in nature. There's also a new policy that recognizes that cannabis greenhouse operations can be established, but that they need to go through a zoning bylaw amendment and meet specific criteria related to their use. So with that, I'll turn it back to Brian to talk about the residential land use policies.
Yes, and thank you. So residential land use policies, this, and I know council's aware of this, but certainly from a provincial perspective and even regionally and locally, the provision of adequate housing is a significant issue. And the province has really set a path forward and progressively moved towards creating additional opportunity on how and where housing is provided. It's a function of everything from affordability to a demographic that is very much shifting towards, as a society, we are aging. And you know, Tecumseh is not any different in that respect. So there's this real realization from a policy perspective that we need to make better use of the resources we currently have, where we have the servicing capacity to offer intensification and to better utilize the housing stock that we have, in fact. And so the policy framework from the province down is very much looking at adaptation and intensification and infill as important, in addition to our greenfield sites having an appropriate mix. And again, I would just remind you that what we're summarizing here isn't the full breadth of the policies around residential development. These are the new policy areas. There's still a whole lot of language around encouraging lots of different things going on in the residential area. So with that in mind, quite a significant change. One is that there's an intensification target that has been established regionally for 15% of development occurring by way of intensification projects, which is trying to encourage not just extending new infrastructure out into greenfield areas, but having intensification take place throughout existing neighborhoods. The town has, as a result of various reasons, had quite a bit of intensification taking place over the last number of years, actually, and are under construction as we speak. A couple of very distinct things that are happening now as a function of changes to the provincial planning legislation is the idea of permitting a second dwelling unit within the main dwelling as it currently existing dwellings. So that could be a single family dwelling, it could be a semi-detached dwelling, or it could be a dwelling in a townhouse, a row of townhouses where you can permit a second dwelling with criteria, adequate servicing, for example, but it would be permitted as of right. And this was a very aggressive move by a former provincial government that has been carried forward under the new PPS, provincial policy statement, and is quite a significant change for us in Tecumseh. And the second that's reflected in the draft official plan is to permit a second dwelling unit as an accessory or an ancillary structure that would be on the property with a home or a semi-detached or a townhouse. And again, there are criteria, but also it's subject to a rezoning. So you'd have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment to demonstrate how you meet specific criteria to allow that type of structure. And it would take very unique circumstances to support that in terms of lot area, sufficient servicing and so on to allow that kind of intensification. But again, the province has made it clear that these are the types of intensification policies that are required. There is now the introduction of an affordable housing target for 20% of all new housing in keeping with the county OP that it be deemed to be affordable. And finally, we currently have 3 official plans that have a range of density targets, and they are now coalesced into a single policy approach allowing for low, medium, and high density. Those are allowed up to the densities that are shown on the screen. So for low, we're looking at up to 20 units per hectare. Medium would be 20 to 50 units per hectare with a maximum height for the buildings of 4 stories, and high 50 units per hectare, a maximum height of 6 stories. Now, within the document itself, it speaks to what are the criteria locationally on where these types of uses would go, and what are the criteria you have to evaluate these projects against to ensure that they are palatable at these locations. So it would go back to servicing issues and the compatibility section that Chad was just discussing, where there are specific criteria to look at how do we integrate these types of developments into into our community. And for example, high density is anticipated to be on an arterial road or within a reasonable distance of an arterial road, or within our Main Street district. So you can see though, when you look on the right-hand column, it looks at from the top, the Tecumseh current densities that are provided in the former Tecumseh town of official plan, and heights, and for St. Clair Beach and for Sandwich South. And there is some commonality between what's proposed and what currently exists in different areas. And certainly what we've been seeing that's fairly consistent in some of our higher density areas is around 50 units per hectare seems to be quite common. And really, it starts to become a function of how the use fits on a property, the support services that are required, whether it be parking and landscaping, and the infrastructure to support it. And again, we go back to the issue of ensuring compatibility. Okay, and so that's a bit of a policy change. And we've tried to make it clearer for everyone using the official plan, the range of issues that you have to consider when we're looking at these. I know that council will recall, we've had a number of actually intensification projects that have either gone through the planning process and are being built or have already been built, and some that are continuing to go through a planning process. So these are policies that are intended to provide a greater sense of clarity around decision-making processes and a consistent policy regime amongst our residential areas throughout Tecumseh.
Ryan?
Yes.
Before we move on to another section in that, on the especially on the secondary suites, I know that the Housing Advisory Committee, I sit on it and represent the county. It's been a big supporter and proponent of it, and I know the city of Windsor has gone through a large exercise in promoting it, and then there was basically a lot of it is aging parents because of the lack of long-term care and many other, and also for disabled children, adult children. And when you made reference to having to have, obviously there's a requirements for them to be able to do it. Obviously, the zoning piece itself. I know the province and I know the association, AMO, has been talking with the province on that provincial policy statement and inclusionary zoning. And have you heard anything, through your planning advisory groups and so forth, that where they stand on that? Because obviously this becomes a controversial for some people, not in my backyard type thing, especially on affordable housing and many of those. Is there anything, and I think the province is supportive of adding inclusionary zoning, but have you heard anything in terms of if that's actually going to happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not recently. That has been a discussion that it seems to bubble up every so often, and then there's a number of reviews that are undertaken. But as of this point in time, we haven't seen any specifics coming out. And in fact, we've had recent discussions with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs on a number of issues, and this one is still unresolved, I guess I would say at this time. But what we'll do we will make note and again, look at that from the perspective of, are there any general policies we may want to bring forward for council to consider at least in this regard? And what are the implications and what form can they take? So we will, we will certainly do that.
Okay. The next section is the general commercial land use policy section. And this section essentially consolidates a number of commercial related designations that are in the existing official plan. And it recognizes that these commercial areas are dynamic in nature and they need to be able to evolve with retail trends. So they permit the full range of commercial type uses, retail, office, and service uses. And this is the only commercial designation outside of the mixed use Main Street designation that I'll talk about in just a moment. And these lands, you'll find these lands throughout the municipality. The Main Street mixed use land use policies, essentially this designation coincides with the Tecumseh Road Main Street CIP, Community Improvement Plan. That's the document that informed the development of these policies. It's predominantly commercial in its focus, but it allows for a host of uses, including office, institutional, recreational, medium high density residential uses. And we're seeing a lot of these types of uses start to establish themselves within the Tecumseh Road Main Street area. One of the critical policies within the Main Street mixed use land use designation is that it prohibits automotive uses, including drive-through establishments, as well as large format commercial uses, because these don't contribute to the walkability that we want to see within the Main Street mixed use area. So high density residential is permitted. And prior to this, in the current official plan, it wasn't permitted without going through an entire official plan amendment exercise. So that's something that's a significant change that was brought to the official plan through this draft document. Brian's now going to talk about the business park land use policies.
So the business park land use really is our area where there's a range of light industrial uses permitted. That continues to be the case in the draft document. In addition, we would consider other non-industrial uses such, they're large-scale private sports facilities, small-scale medical marijuana, which we've had a few, by way of zoning bylaw amendment with criteria. So not as of right, but it would go through a rezoning process. And truck transportation related uses, which, really the town has, by virtue of its location along the 401 and Walker Road, and the strong industrial component that exists in Windsor and throughout the region, there is quite a truck transportation related uses along Walker and County Road 46. And those are certainly encouraged to continue. One of the significant changes that is being proposed is that commercial uses now are permitted throughout the business park area. And really it is, what we've seen so far is that these types of commercial uses generally are drawn towards your high volume traffic corridors. And there are instances where having commercial uses deep within an industrial area does raise some issues in terms of mixing of uses. And so there was a feeling, and we went through the discussion papers on this issue, that we should provide a little more structure in the business park area and start to discern the appropriateness of commercial uses being on our main corridors and protecting our industrial lands for industrial uses. And that really is one of the motivations of the provincial policy statement under our current provincial government. So we've introduced a policy that says, yes, these types of commercial uses, offices, restaurants, they support the employment community. They provide uses to other residents who are in the vicinity and other users who are driving through. but that we would like them to locate on your major transportation corridors. So the plan speaks to Walker Road, North Talbot, as we've listed here in our covering report, County Road 46, 22, Jamsill, and County Road 42, that where there are the need for commercial uses, that they at least are pushed towards these types of transportation corridors. Now, of course, the plan also recognizes the extension of the Old Castle Hamlet settlement area along the 401 to take into account the 57 hectares of land that was brought forward in the County of Essex official plan a number of years ago, based on some analysis undertaken by the municipality. And the policies support the expansion of the business park area along this important 401 and County Road 46 corridor. These lands are currently identified in the county official plan as a settlement area, and now the town's official plan would bring them into a business park land use designation, and they would provide for continued employment growth for the town in that vicinity and in that important corridor. And finally, all lands within the business park would be subject to site plan control throughout the municipality. Those are the major changes for the business park land use policies. And as you know, there really are three major areas, and these policies apply to all of those. With respect to Highway Service Center, we really don't have any substantive revisions. This is an area that is at the 401, the northwest side of 401 Manning Road, and was identified for Highway Service Center type uses a number of years ago, early in the 2000s, and it had initiated actually pre-amalgamation with the Township of Sandwich South after a number of major planning studies were undertaken, and it was found that there was a need, particularly with the improvements to the 401 corridor and that whole basically Montreal down to Windsor and crossing deep into the United States, that was a very significant economic corridor, and that there was a need for some significant commercial uses that could support that transportation use along that important area. And so the policies have been carried forward. They continue to be in place, and they were introduced by way of separate amendment, as I said, in the early 2000s. So no significant changes there. As it relates to community facility land use planning policies, now that quite often we would refer to, sorry, Chad, I'm just, that would refer to quite often institutional uses. So the nomenclature can change sometimes, but basically the significant change is that we're proposing joint use agreements with town and other public agencies. And I hope council recognizes these are words that are in the plan, and council and the town is encouraging their use. It doesn't bind council into these types of documents. They're always at the pleasure of council, but they're certainly in keeping with sound land use planning, provincial objectives for joint use arrangements, and so on. And then the plan clearly establishes that we ideally would want schools adjacent to parks for shared use, and to have them centralized for full use by neighborhoods for walking and cycling. The balance of the policies are very consistent and common with the existing policies. So I'll turn it over to Chad for the recreational land use policies.
Unmute. The recreational land use policies essentially take the policy direction that was established through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and incorporate it into the new official plan. And one of the significant changes is that it establishes a hierarchy of park space, including neighborhood parks, community parks, and specialized parks. And it sets out ratios for the amount of park space that is deemed to be ideal, including 1 hectare per 1,000 population for neighborhood parks, 2 hectares for community parks, and 3.5 hectares per 1,000 for specialized parks. The only standard that was included in the existing official plan was with the Sandwich South official plan, where the standard was 4 hectares per 1,000 population for parkland in general. And neither the St. Clair Beach nor the Tecumseh official plans contain these standards. There are also guidelines with respect to where parkland should be located. And essentially, just as with school facilities, it should be centrally located in neighborhoods where possible, within easy walking distance, and they should be visible and accessible, getting back to that whole SEPTED approach. And where possible, they should be connected to form a parkland system throughout the municipality. And finally, where possible, they're encouraged to be located adjacent stormwater management features to maximize the sense of open space within these neighborhoods.
Actually,
Natural
Chad,
heritage, yes.
Chad, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if we could, I wanted to be clear. I think in the existing Tecumseh official plan, when we were saying there weren't ratios, there is a development scheme in the existing development plan that was really developed prior to former Tecumseh really taking off in the 1980s, that had a number of park ratios that were distributed throughout the former, well, now it's the developed town of Tecumseh. But I just wanted to be clear that there were some ratios and criteria established, and but not in the way that they are established right now.
Thank you for that correction, Brian. Natural heritage system land use policies, again, is a unique approach that you won't find in the current official plans. It's a systems-based approach, and the natural heritage system comprises lands designated natural environment, as well as lands that are considered natural environment overlays. And these aren't designations, they're just overlays that you'll find. And I'm going to go take a second to get to go to the mapping on this. It's easier to describe the system with the mapping reference. So this is the Natural Heritage System Schedule C in the official plan. And you can see it comprises the natural environment designation, which is Fairplay Woods. It's the only natural environment designation that was determined to be significant through the Essex Region Natural Heritage Systems Strategy. The light green areas that you see throughout the hatched areas are the natural environment overlays. And those are areas that are second priority protection as established in that Essex Region Natural Heritage Strategy, and it's called EARNS as a short-term reference. So the EARNS, it met only a certain number of criteria, and that's why it was considered to be second priority. But the objective is to ultimately connect the second priority areas, the overlay areas, with the natural environment areas, and that is done through restoration opportunity overlays, which is the third priority. And these are areas that don't have, and they're in the olive green color you see on this map, and they don't have currently natural environment features, but they're areas that the EARNS study saw as having potential for connecting these small islands of green throughout the municipality, and to provide for buffers to protect the overlay areas and the natural environment areas. And over time, through the review of development proposals, this system will start to fill in, and you'll have this robust natural heritage system that is much healthier than having these little independent, isolated natural environment areas out there. So this is a really significant change in the way that natural environment planning is done in the town. That's being proposed through the new official plan. The next section, Brian, is the future development land use policies. And I'll take you back to that in just a second here.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Mayor and Council, you'll recall that we have lands that were identified primarily in the Sandwich South official plan, and they had been called Hamlet Development, which was a name that in and of itself had certain, I think, misunderstandings attributed to it, notwithstanding what the policies may have said. So we have taken lands that were included as part of the growth areas identified in that plan, and and renamed them future development. And these are lands that are identified for long-term urban use, the nature of which is still under review. So we have more clearly established in the official plan that there are really two key areas that are subject to the future development land use policies. And the lands are identified as such. And they are the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan area, which has been in the works for some time, and it's integrating a number of studies, both some of which involve with the City of Windsor on stormwater issues, transportation issues with the City of Windsor, transportation issues with the County of Essex, and then our own servicing and planning reviews in relation to the lands in the Tecumseh Hamlet area. So we'll just take a look at the map to see the lands affected. And they are the gray lands along the Banwell corridor south of 22 and all the way down 43. Sorry, yes, thanks, Chad. And then over on Manning Road, there's a smaller piece that's just south of the railway track. What the plan indicates is that those lands are subject to a study that is near completion, the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan. And that what is anticipated is once that study is complete and it goes through its final review of council and public review, those policies will be taken and put into the new official plan by way of an amendment, okay? And it will guide specifically development in those gray areas. And in fact, the gray areas will be turned into yellow for residential, red for commercial, parks and so on, including a detailed transportation and active transportation system. So that is the first kind of clear policy distinction that we're introducing in the draft new official plan, that it clearly establishes what is intended to happen to bring these lands to a development state, which currently is not clear in the current policy environment. And then when we go to Oldcastle, which also has lands identified future development, again, they are the gray lands. They are a little bit more detached from each other. So this area, the plan clearly establishes and council has committed to commencing a study for the Oldcastle Hamlet Special Planning Study. And what it will look at is what are the preferred uses that will take place on these lands. Again, we'll go through a planning process that involves public engagement. And it ultimately will lead to a preferred distribution of land uses on the gray lands. And those would go back to council ultimately and be introduced to the plan by way of an amendment. And I think one of the most significant policy proposals in the new draft official plan is that these gray lands will only be allowed to convert to an urban use by way of completion of these studies. It won't be that individual applications will come forward for one piece of land over here, such as we did have at one point that led to a fairly significant Ontario Municipal Board hearing, but that the policy will create the environment where the town will take the lead, will complete the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan, bring it into this document, will initiate and complete the Oldcastle Secondary Plan and bring it into the document. And later in this discussion, we'll just talk about the status of those two studies. So those are very, I think, significant policy approaches that are important. Moving on to natural resources and natural hazards. Chad, maybe if you go to Schedule F, we'll just talk about natural resources. Now, Tecumseh is quite interesting from the perspective of there are some areas of Essex County that have massive gravel extraction opportunities, and you would see official plans that have all kinds of protective land designations throughout these areas. Really in Tecumseh, what we're dealing with are, on this map, the area identified as yellow are salt deposits, which are significantly underground. And this is information we received from the province of Ontario, and significant groundwater recharge areas, again, information provided by the province. And the policies just set out within those areas considerations that might need to be made. So that's the extent of our natural resource, other than agriculture and the natural heritage features that Chad's already talked about. And as it relates to natural hazards, that's something that, of course, the town is very familiar with. And there is quite a history of having policies related to, and Chad, if we could go to Schedule D. And this identifies sort of a tiered policy regime that operates really commonly throughout Essex County in accordance with the Essex Region Conservation Authority. And it identifies your light blue areas, which are the limit of the regulated area, acronym LoRa. And those are areas that could be subject to flooding by virtue of significant events. And what the plan essentially says, sorry?
Brian, could you, you or Chad, increase the size of that map? Okay.
So the light blue is the lands, the LoRa, and they are subject to the regulations of the Conservation Authority, and they may be subject to flooding under very unique circumstances. And these are maps that, again, are prepared by the Conservation Authority. So the policy indicates that if you're in the light blue area, a permit is required from IRCA. The area that is the dark, on mine it looks blue, but the red almost makes it look purple, overhatching, and that is the floodplain development control area. And those lands are subject to flooding events. And there's a two-zone approach that has been used consistently through the Windsor-Essex region for identifying the floodway, which is non-developable, and the flood zone area, which may be subject to flooding. Development may be permitted, subject to permitting from the Conservation Authority again. And finally, there's the areas that are subject to the Lake St. Clair, and it's called the Lake St. Clair flood prone area, and you can see it as a red hatching. And that's an area that is subject to the 1 in 100 based on current mapping, flood conditions on a 1 in 100 year event, and again, subject to permitting from the Conservation Authority. So if we zoom the map back out, you'll see that there are inland water courses that are the subject of these regulatory requirements and are a requirement of the provincial policy statement as well. And then finally, if we were to turn to, if I can just find the schedule, Chad, G, we now in the official plan are identifying the areas that are to be protected and made aware of in relation to the intake protection zones. And there was a significant study undertaken by, again, the Conservation Authority as it relates to potable water and protecting the integrity of the potable water system. Our mapping fundamentally deals with identifying areas where water is flowing ultimately out into the Great Lakes system where the intakes are. We don't, of course, have a plant. We purchase our water and under an agreement with the city of Windsor, which is just some kilometers to the west. But these are areas that are just subject to policies where there is a consideration on land use changes and that sort of thing. So it now takes in the intake protection zones and puts them on a map so that we are now able to identify, areas that may have concern. And we have a relationship with the Conservation Authority and a staff person who actually oversees a program with us as the municipality on there. So, now we've just clearly identified these are the areas of consideration for the town. Finally, as it relates to hazards, there is a policy included that has a genesis from the provincial policy statement. And what it fundamentally says is that where there is a flood prone area, that we have to ensure that safe access is provided and able to be accommodated under a flood event. And so that's a consideration that we have when we're looking at potential development opportunities in those lands. And there are a number of ways that one can achieve a safe access standard. So that policy is now in the plan and just reflective of the provincial policy statement as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Chad for some of the changes in the land division policies.
Essentially, there are two ways to create lots within the town, and that's through the plan of subdivision / condominium process or through the consent to sever process. With respect to the plan of subdivision process, we've added policies that allow the town to request various studies, traffic studies and servicing studies and studies of that nature to support these applications. It's now required that they be listed in your official plan in order for you to request these. And there's a cross-reference to the implementation section where there's a number, likely 30 to 40 studies that the town can ask when it's reviewing development proposals. We've also added condominium conversion policies, and this was after discussion with the county planner, and she offered some good suggestions on condominium conversions and the criteria for condominium conversions. So those are incorporated into the land division section. With respect to severances, the significant changes have to do with farm lot size, and we've established, or the draft official plan establishes a minimum farm lot size of 40 hectares or 100 acres, and that's in accordance with the County of Essex farm lot size study. There's only a handful of farm lots of that significant size that would be impacted by this, and so there's not going to be a huge impact by increasing the minimum size, and we thought we'd protect the resource as much as possible by establishing this greater land area for farm lot divisions. The current Sandwich South official plan establishes a minimum farm lot area of 19 hectares or 47 acres. We've removed the retirement lot consent policy as it's no longer permitted by the PPS, and we've added the condition of rezoning the retained lot farm parcel as part of a surplus dwelling lot severance to prohibit the construction of a dwelling unit. And this is something that the Committee of Adjustment has been considering for the last few years since this change was incorporated into the provincial policy statement. But now it's to be included in the new official plan. There's also another policy that was removed from the surplus dwelling lot policies, and currently in the Sandwich South official plan, it's required that the owner, or the person that's proposing the surplus dwelling lot, have owned the subject farm property and another farm property for a minimum period of 5 years. And we've removed that because that was put in place to prevent speculation. And with the requirement to rezone the retained parcel to prohibit a dwelling unit, effectively that removes the speculative chance of those severances happening. The urban design policy section is another very unique policy section that you'll find more and more in newer official plans. Urban design concerns itself with the relationship amongst buildings, landscape elements, the spaces between them, and streetscape features, with the objective of making communities more walkable, accessible, safe, and aesthetically pleasing. And these policies reflect some of the practices that we currently have in place. And certain developments come to mind, the development on Old Tecumseh Road and Brighton Road, that little commercial plaza where we brought the building, or council agreed to bring the building closer to the road, and the developer also agreed to that. And it creates a much more pedestrian friendly, walkable, and visually appealing development. These policies were also put into practice with respect to the 2 6-unit dwellings on Les Bronce Road across from the church. And we've been incorporating urban design policies, or following good urban design policies, with respect to some of the higher density development, residential development along the Tecumseh Road corridor more recently. So we've been practicing this, but now we've got policies to support that direction in the official plan. And one of the big policies within this section is the establishment. It encourages the establishment of urban design guidelines, which will provide further detail on exactly what types of urban design policies would be put in place for various locations throughout the town. We're currently using urban design policies within the Tecumseh Road Main Street CIP area, but elsewhere there are no formal policy environment pertaining to them. Moving on to municipal services now. Brian, just unmute.
I can assure council that no matter how much we use this program, and I'm on Zoom all day, I tend to forget at some point to push that button. So I apologize. Municipal services is really a section of the official plan that encapsulates a lot of work that's been undertaken by council over the last number of years as it relates to an update on the water wastewater master plan. You can appreciate that the environment that the official plans that exist today were adopted in had a different servicing regime behind them. And in fact, the Sandwich South official plan was contemplating undertaking reviews of how will we provide water and wastewater to our growth areas. And in fact, through the master plan process and the update on the master plan process, there have actually been significant investments in infrastructure for water and wastewater in the town, and a very strong relationship with the City of Windsor by way of the purchasing of services. So the plan brings from those master plan documents and incorporates it into the official plan as policy. And the really strong tie is that development is A, intended to be fully serviced, and B, extended in a way that is financially viable and for the municipality and is sustainable over time. And I think one of the major changes in the document is that we've introduced some very clear policies around stormwater management. And again, as council knows, that's a significant issue for the municipality. There's cross-referencing to the Windsor-Essex Region Stormwater Management Manual, which is being used on all development reviews at this time. And then in addition, we've basically established a much more robust, Chad, if we just continue to the next page, a much more robust policy environment as it relates to stormwater management. And fundamentally, the current official plans are almost operating in a void as it relates to stormwater management. So we've really, I think, heightened the game for the municipality and tried to create significant clarity around the objectives of the municipality as it relates to stormwater. And we hope the end result of that being a community that actually has some ability to endure the test of climate change and and face the realities that are really coming down the road. So and we've made it clear that one of the the preferred forms of servicing is through regionalized stormwater management facilities. It's not really viable to have any number of individual facilities randomly located everywhere, because these are facilities that we ultimately will inherit, and they will become municipal infrastructure, and they require maintenance. So there's quite a significant policy section on stormwater. And finally, we just wanted to make note that where appropriate, we have identified that low impact development could be utilized, and that would take very unique conditions, but certainly it's something I think the municipality would want to be open to. One of the challenges in speaking with our engineering friends is that our largely clay based soil conditions really make for some challenges on low impact design, but it's still something that I think is something we'd want to be able to look at and encourage where appropriate. As it relates to transportation, again, we have the advantage of a number of things that have happened. One is, from a regional perspective, a transportation master plan regionally, a community or a CWATS active transportation plan that exists regionally and that the town is very engaged in implementing, and a transportation master plan that the town has that took the time to look at our transportation needs over the future and what type of community do we want as it relates to transportation. And one of the most important things I think in the plan is that we try and make the link between land use planning has an impact on transportation planning. Transportation planning has an impact on our physical community development. And we've tried to place emphasis, as you will see in the opening line here, that a multimodal system is most appropriate. And that's not just because not everybody can own a car, but it's because not everybody will want to own a car at some point or will have the option to own a car. And, so we want to put emphasis on walking, biking, transit, and automobiles on a tiered system. The town has had some really good success with its transit system and its linking into the Windsor system. So the policies really try to build on successes to date. It establishes some clear objectives around complete streets, which is a concept that was introduced in the town's transportation master plan. And it establishes, and when we say complete streets, we're talking about multimodal transportation. We're talking about an improved environmental sustainability issues, quality of life issues, design issues. And when we've identified a hierarchy for the town's road system, which comes from the Transportation Master Plan. We've tried to tie back that even roads that aren't on the towns within our jurisdiction, i.e. county roads, for example, and where they go through urban areas, the expectation and the desire of council is that those roads will be designed in accordance with our complete street objectives and the urban environments that they are traveling through. So that even though a county road might go through an urban area, we still want it to fit the context of that area and meet the needs of all of our traveling public, whether it be driving, walking, or bicycling. So there is a road classification system. We have already received some comments. Thank you to Andrew, Councillor Dowie, and there are some interesting observations that have been made. So we know we'll be making some tweaking and getting back to council on some input we've received and trying to align the master plan document with some realities that actually exist. So any comments that we've received, we propose will go back to council in a fulsome manner. And I actually would encourage all of council to please make contact at any time with us to if you have any issues. But we know on the transportation front, there's a little bit of tweaking that we'll have to undertake. So again, a much stronger and I would argue robust transportation section, and there is mapping that goes with that, which identifies the hierarchical system and the active transportation system that either exists or is proposed through the town. Chad?
Section 10 deals with implementation and interpretation, and this essentially sets out the statutory powers and the tools available to council and other municipal officials in implementing the policies of the plan. And I'll just highlight the key changes for council. The site plan control policies have been revised to include that greenhouse operations shall be subject to site plan control, just as mushroom operations are currently. There's a section on community benefits charges that has been added as an implementation tool, and these charges didn't exist prior to mid-2020. There are a number of committees and their mandates included in the official plan, just to give the reader a sense of the committees and their responsibilities in carrying out and implementing the policy of the plan. Currently, there's no reference other than to the Committee of Adjustment in the existing official plans. The new official plan sets out that settlement areas in their entirety will be known as community improvement areas. And within these areas, council can pass a bylaw designating specific community improvement project areas, just as we did with the Tecumseh Road Main Street area. There's new policy concerning concerning consultation and application requirements, and this contains those studies I was referencing earlier when I talked about the plan of subdivision process. There's a really comprehensive list of studies that we found that we've used from time to time. And there's some that we haven't requested yet, but might be required given the changing nature of development and development circumstances. So we wanted to ensure that we had a comprehensive list so that we could ask for these policies as part of development review. There's also a section that encourages developers to hold community meetings. And we've had these before with some of the more significant developments in the community, where the developer will go out to the community by itself and present the proposal before formally submitting development applications to the town, just to get a gauge on the community's opinion of the development, also to take some ownership of the development, and to listen to the community prior to going through the formal public process, which might not be as friendly a process to have your viewpoints heard. So we found that it's been quite an effective tool as part of the development review process. There's also a section that's taken from the county official plan with respect to meaningful public participation with First Nations, Métis, and other individuals and community stakeholder groups in implementing, monitoring, and reviewing the plan. And also one that references working cooperatively with the County of Essex and other local municipalities, and establishing a formal protocol for ongoing liaison matters, because a lot of these developed matters, they don't respect political boundaries, things such as transportation and servicing coordination, natural heritage areas, economic development, climate change. These things all cross municipal boundaries. So it's really important to ensure that you're working with your fellow municipalities in the region to coordinate these issues. And those are the significant changes to the implementation section. And the final section that Brian will talk to you about is the secondary planning section.
Okay, thank you. And so we're just a couple more sections to go. And this section 11 of the draft plan called secondary plans. Currently, we have one secondary plan that's in effect, and it affects Maidstone Hamlet secondary plan. And when that was incorporated into the official plan, it was sort of dispersed as policy throughout the document and a little bit cumbersome to use. And just to remind council, a secondary plan is really a tool that's available to the municipality when we want to look at certain geographic spaces that are looking to develop in the future, and there's some interest in providing more refined, detailed policy around the development regime that's going to happen there. So Maidstone Hamlet is one. We will see others coming forward. So we've taken a lot of those different policies that were dispersed throughout the official plan, and now we have a chapter called secondary plans, and it's a place where we'll put these types of documents or special planning studies that will be amended into the official plan and affect specific geographic common locations throughout the municipality. So the policies are very consistent with those that had been brought forward previously. It's easier to use in the document. And one of the things that we've also tried to introduce, because the PPS requires it, is the ability for these areas to also benefit in the residential areas for second unit dwellings inside of dwellings, subject to full servicing, and the secondary ancillary units as well. These subject to a rezoning, of course, because those are things that the province is looking at us introducing in our urban settlement areas. So really, this is a bit of housekeeping in this area, and we hope makes for a more functional and usable reading of the plan. And then I think, Mr. Mayor, if we could, we will just quickly go through the maps that are now part of the document, starting with Schedule A, and we'll just kind of go through those quickly. And I just want to hit on a couple of changes. So we've spoken to the community structure plan that is part of the official plan now as Schedule A. And then if we proceed down to the next map, it is just the land use plan for the entire town. So it's basically showing the areas in white as agricultural, and the green and blue are your highway service center and natural environment areas. And then it establishes the settlement areas and their geographic boundaries with details on separate schedules. So if we just go to those, we will see there that is the northern settlement area in detail with color coding in terms of the types of uses that are proposed and the policies that go with those. One small change, Mr. Mayor, if we look down at, yes, right there, you'll see just on the west side of County Road 43, south of 42, there are a number of lots that have homes on them, and there's a small area that Chad's circling, which is now yellow. It's like an upside down arrowhead. And that area was a remnant piece of land after the county expropriated for the Banwell Road realignment, which Chad is showing with the arrow. And this remnant piece had services brought to it by the landowner a few years ago. And council supported the extension of services to support, I think, approximately 4 future severed lots. There's one there currently. And so we've just included those in the settlement area because it will be on full services. And it's just sort of a minor adjustment for these lands that were sort of created as an island because of the road improvements that are being put forward as part of the 43 realignment and one day a new County Road 43. And then if we go down to the next map, if we could, Chad, it is the Old Castle Hamlet settlement area. And again, you'll see the area that is the expansion of the business park area on the easterly edge up between the 401 and County Road 46. And they are, that comprises approximately 57 hectares that were brought in through the county official plan process. And the other change that we're proposing based on a number of inquiries, Chad, could you just identify the town's land at Walker and Highway 3? If we could maybe just zoom in. Right now, you'll be familiar with Essex Power has their a main office and yard there. And the town has lands that you'll see the fire hall just on the right there in the purple. And the area owned by the town that Chad is outlining is proposed for commercial development. There have been a number of inquiries around the use of this land for commercial type uses. And so it seemed timely and appropriate as part of this process to identify it that way. It currently is in a purple community facility because it had been town owned at the time of the amalgamation of the municipalities. So that's a change proposed. And then if we go down to the next land use schedule, it is Old Castle Hamlet, which is reflective of the land use designations that apply in that area.
Maidstone, Brian.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Yes, Maidstone, thank you, Chad. And if we continue, we will go down to Schedule C. And Chad has reviewed this, the Natural Heritage System. And if we just continue going through these, Chad, Schedule D, Natural Hazards. And these are the road classifications and the hierarchy, which I appreciate at this scale is a little bit challenging, but consistent with the Transportation Master Plan. And then we continue to Schedule E-2, the Active Transportation Network, which again is consistent with CWATS and the Master Transportation Plan. And these are trail systems that are specifically shown in the Maidstone Hamlet Secondary Plan. And then we continue to Schedule F, which are natural resources. And finally, Schedule D, which are the intake protection zones. So I think we have something in the range of maybe 10 maps. And I think some of our official plans maybe have 2 maps right now. So the level of detail and the information that's provided is quite considerable. Finally, Mr. Mayor and Council, if we could just have a moment to discuss really 2 matters. One is the status of the, Chad, if you could just go up on the report, the status of the 2 planning studies I made reference to. One is the Tecumseh Hamlet Secondary Plan, and it does relate to a number of municipal Class EA assessments that are ongoing. And we wanted to just let Council know it's an opportunity because we're speaking to them as part of the OP, that they are studies that have previously were initiated by Council. They have gone through some levels of public review, PICs, and reporting to Council. Final revisions are just being undertaken now that are trying to incorporate some adjustments that are required because of stormwater management regulatory issues. And those stormwater management facilities that are going to be identified in those areas do affect the developable lands, the area of land that is available to develop. So we're trying to fine tune these facilities so that we can maximize the lands available for development. That will come back to Council. Further public consultation will take place, and we anticipate the new official plan in some form will be adopted by Council in sometime in the next maybe 4 months or 3 to 4 months, and that secondary plan will come forward after that, and it will be incorporated into the official plan as an amendment. The Old Castle Hamlet Special Planning Study for Future Development Lands was a commitment made by Council, both by way of a resolution earlier and by incorporation into the 2020 budget. It was anticipated it would commence in late 2020, but as a result really of other priorities that really weren't anticipated this year, we can see that study will be delayed into 2021 for commencement. And we're just working through the logistics of a reasonable timeline for that. But it's still fully called for in the official plan, and we will continue to bring forward a budget allocation for that in the 2021 budget. So finally, Mr. Mayor, if we could just very quickly, the next steps of the official plan process. So this is the draft. that has been put out for comment. And what we anticipate is the holding of public information centers through a Zoom platform. Unfortunately, with COVID, our normal in-house having CIP or PICs throughout the community is really not a viable alternative at this time, but we will be using a Zoom platform that is designed for PICs, and we'll be advertising for that in late October. Some new software and platform called PlaceSpeak we'll be utilizing, which is we'll be directing people to our webpage, which takes you to a PlaceSpeak, which is a platform where you can look through sections of the document and provide comments, and it's a little bit more interactive. Early in October to commence. We also will be doing some formal consultations with First Nations and Métis communities by delivery of the draft document, seeking input, and holding meetings as desired. And then finally, following all of the prior consultation, we will have discussions with the County of Essex as our approval authority and the Conservation Authority to address any of the public concerns that may have come up that would affect those agencies, and try to get their feedback on those. With the idea being that when a plan finally comes to council for adoption, it's good to have the approval authority fully invested in the process and in dialogue with us. And we've had really good input from the county and IRCA to date. And it really helps to have a document that is then ready when council adopts to go through the approval process much more efficiently and quickly, hopefully. And we're targeting early November for that, with the holding of a statutory public meeting by council, again, on the Zoom platform, as far as we can see right now, in early December. And that would put, all things being fair, maybe sometime after that for consideration of adoption, or we'll assess the situation and council will, give us some direction as to where to go from there as well. So you can see it's a fairly aggressive timeline, I think, but one that we're very anxious to get through and get council in a position to have a new official plan that it's comfortable with and that the community is comfortable with. So that, Mr. Mayor, and council, is a very quick overview of the key changes that follows from our February presentation on more details around the policies. And if there's any questions or comments, we'll be happy to address them as we can.
Well, thank you very much, Brian and Chad, for the report. It's nice to be able now we're getting close to the finish line, which is certainly a good thing. I have one question, and I'll ask council as well if they want to weigh in as well. Is when we referred to the hamlet, Sandwich South Hamlet, and you made reference that the plan itself is probably 3 to 4 months, before it comes back to us, and then the issue of the subdivision plan to be completed. Those are extremely important lands, obviously, for the municipality in terms of development and so forth. So there's been an anticipation, obviously, of wanting to get them up. So, in your opinion, obviously, we know we need to run a sanitary line, to service those particular lands and some of the services. But setting that aside, the official plan in that, when do you feel that all-encompassing and ready for those landowners or developers to say, okay, we're ready to start developing, the hamlet?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, that is the question. And so what we would anticipate is next year, well, let's keep one thing in mind. So the Manning Road Secondary Plan area is sort of a district that is a little further along. And of course, the town is taking aggressive steps to
get that going.
Yes, exactly. We'll put it that way, get that going. So that's sort of one strategic initiative that's happening along the Manning Road corridor south of 22. As it relates to the other area, which is fundamentally, in simple terms, along the Banwell corridor, south of 22 down to 42. If we had a map, it would be helpful. Yeah, there's two fundamental things I think going on there. One is completion of the secondary plan, which finalizes the preferred land use and the development scheme that will take place there. And then the second will be the timing of implementation of introduction of infrastructure into that area. So, I mean, and you mentioned it, Mr. Mayor, it will be a function of, you know, we know where our sanitary sewers are. They're up at County Road 22. We do have a corridor to bring them south, at least to Intersection Road. So it'll be the timing of the construction of that piece of infrastructure commensurate with the completion of the secondary plan. Now, you'll recall I was discussing earlier the issue of integrating stormwater solutions for this area, and council had funded our joint study with the City of Windsor on the Upper Little River stormwater study. That study has been completed fundamentally. There are some issues on the Windsor side of Banwell, I believe, with the study, but for all intents and purposes, it has produced results for the municipality, and now our engineers and the engineering consultant for the town is taking the information provided by that study and finalizing the footprint for the stormwater ponds. So what we'll need to do after the secondary plan is done is start thinking about how do those pieces of infrastructure get built. The sanitary probably is the easier of all of them. The storm is going to have some of the challenges that we're facing currently in the Manning Road secondary plan area, but there'll have to be some coordination with developers in that area on the construction of the storm facilities. But really the municipality's target is to have the lands in a situation where there are options available both to the municipality to extend services and for developers to be able to construct services sometime late next year, I would think. Now, with that in mind, you know, it's appropriate to start strategizing around timing of investment of infrastructure. You know, and where as you're aware, you'll see it's hard to tell on this map, but where it says Intersection Road, the edge of the municipal boundary is that black line running just east of Banwell Road. So there's a level of coordination with the city as well, the City of Windsor, who, as part of our land transfer agreement of a number of years ago, they actually took over Banwell Road down to the tracks, and the municipal boundary is just some 22 or 26 feet east of Banwell Road. So we're integrating their EA for Banwell into the development opportunities that exist in this area. So, you know, I think to see things happening in this area will take some real strategizing around the timing of how infrastructure is introduced to the area to support the development. Now, the one thing we know is that development you don't approve a plan and then development just happens. You know, things just instantaneously happen. It's very incremental. And so we know that there are certain components of the infrastructure required to support this area that will be introduced over time. And there is a certain amount of development that we believe can happen with limited road improvements, for example. And that was part of the analysis that the town undertook with the Tecumseh Hamlet traffic impact study. That was fairly significant for this whole area. So I think, you know, the short answer is hopefully by the end of next year, we'll be in a position where some of those investments can be made privately and publicly, because there will be joint investments here in terms of the development of the lands.
Yeah, and that's my concern, Brian, in terms of the municipality bordering another municipality, when they have so much land to the north of that to continue to develop, that it doesn't become an urgency for them, but it's an urgency for us. And that's why the whole issue of the realignment of 43 was so important to get the county on board, and finally construction start in 43. And because we own both sides, right? And so forth. So it's that my fear is that one municipality will drag their feet in getting that done. Although they, in the agreement as well, they must give us the minimum of 3 outlets to that road.
Yeah, that is correct.
And so forth. So anyway, maybe it's a discussion for for another day, but in particular that for me, I think with the realignment of 43, now we've got the construction in 2023 in mind, and does it make sense to drop the pipe down and start developing at the south end where the school is?
Right.
So that discussion for the near future. But I think for council, I don't want to speak for them, but we've been talking about this for years, and I understand the Manning Road, we're getting much closer there in dealing with that, but we need to get those lands developing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't see all members of council, but if there's any other questions, certainly. Okay, there we go. Councilor Houston, Deputy Mayor, and then Councilor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll kind of echo your comments. And we've talked about development, and a couple of years ago there was interest from the developers, and they were quite interested at the time. So echo your sentiments, and I think it is valuable for us to have a deeper conversation to strategize down the road. But just on the official plan here, no real questions. But to Brian and staff who put the report together, it's a great report, and I recall really discussing the changes earlier on in the year, and I think it does a great job at establishing what is different today, or what we're proposing versus what is existing in the official plan. So I've made some notes, and I've got the plan here. So nothing really specific to comment, but great report, and it makes it easy for us to reference what the changes are. So I'm interested to hear feedback from our residents, and what concerns, and what they see in the document. So, but yeah, good job, and look forward to seeing this come down the road.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Buchetti.
Here, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hillman, Mr. Jeffrey. Well done with the report. Again, like Councillor Houston said, very detailed, a lot of information there, but you're able to hit the highlights and make it easy for us to deal with. But again, moving forward, we're also looking forward to the public input. One of the comments I had, or questions, Brian, was the aggressive timelines. So basically, by the end of the year, we should be at a certain point looking for final approval. So we're looking at maybe in 2021. And as you know, the regional hospitals coming on board, there's momentum there. We're hoping the provincial government makes some announcements so that project can go ahead. So that also entails the other bullet point that you had regarding the Old Castle secondary plan, and pushing that to 2021. Are we able to still, is your intent to do an aggressive timeline for that as well? And if so, is that something that we can kind of put to bed in 2021? So by 2022, moving forward, we should have everything done by then. Is that a realistic timeline to target, or is it still too aggressive?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We're still, as you know, putting the budget together for 2021, just as we speak, and trying to reconcile, I guess, some of the competing pressures that we're dealing with right now. I really would not want to commit right now. We know that it's an important objective for council and for the community. We are wrestling with the realities of what this year has brought to us in terms of being taken off of our work plans to a certain extent as a result of other issues that have surfaced that I know council is very aware of. So knowing that the heavy lift is to get this official plan across the line, we hope get county approval, and we hope a positive response from the public, number one. Number two, Tecumseh Hamlet is near the end of its process, so certainly that is the the next heavy lift in early 21 to get back to council. Hopefully, all things going well and we can make it happen. I would suggest that probably the end of 21 would be the reasonable timeline to start the Old Castle study. Recognizing one of the things that's really become quite interesting is, notwithstanding COVID, the number of the issues that we're dealing with are quite broad right now and expansive. So I think that's a realistic timeline, and I think the Old Castle study, I would suggest, will probably not take as long as the Tecumseh Hamlet secondary plan. It's quite scoped in nature. It's intended to resolve sort of long-term land use issues. But I think we just want time to work through our work plan for 2021, and before we can really confirm if we can go quicker than that or not, and see where that takes us. But I think what I would acknowledge is we do appreciate council's desire to get that off the ground, and the communities as well, and we recognize that wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Brian. And just as a follow-up too, regarding the Tecumseh Hamlet, that stretch along Banwell Road, just south of the tracks, the Belajon properties, I know there's another homeowner there that's asking regarding doing a building lot. Based on these new policies, are they able to, because I read somewhere where you have to have at least 50 acres to sever a lot, but if they want to develop, is that up to the homeowner to present a plan of subdivision to the county where they could develop, provided they pay for the servicing? Or are they still, landlocked where they cannot sever because they don't have the 50-acre number?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if it's within the settlement area, they may be able to sever a lot. If maybe there's an existing home or something to that effect. What the future development policies are proposing, which are very similar to the existing policies that affect these gray lands, is that development beyond severing a single individual home is really subject to the completion of the secondary plan, because the secondary plan will establish how does the infrastructure get there, where do the roads connect, where are the parks located, and that sort of thing. So, the official plan is intending to have that secondary plan completed before development applications come forward, so that there's not, we're not basically having a hodgepodge of individual developments and then trying to fit it all together. The idea of the secondary plan first is that we wrestle down the big issues, we ensure that there's orderly development over time, and that actually it fits together. And 40 years from now, it functions as a walkable, sustainable community. And that's one of the challenges we always have in planning, is that it's one thing to go through a development application process, but we always have to recognize once you build this stuff, it's permanent. It's there forever. So you do want to get it right the first time. So the Belajon lands, which are probably just on the east of the school site, as I recall, they have a few properties. I'm sorry, west. I apologize, west. They have a few properties in there. One severance for a home, that would be possible. The 50-acre issue would not kick in. Multiple lot development would be subject to the secondary plan being completed. And really, the secondary plan will, to some extent, establish the progression of infrastructure and how it's going to move through the area. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, that process may identify that we want to focus on the south area. And the town may take the lead on getting services down to that area first, clearly establishing that any money put out by the municipality is paid back by the development community. Development pays for development, and that philosophy is quite clear in the official plan as well.
Thank you. And if you look at the map, thank you for putting that up. That whole gray area, like the mayor mentioned, with the realignment coming, I could see that whole area becoming that residential urban development. And that's why that urban design was so critical at the county level, because you look at that school, you've got actually two schools, a major park. That to me is prime residential development. And within, I'll tell you, within 3, max 5 years, you're going to see a lot of development coming, especially when that 42 expansion road is completed. The realignments get started in 2023. you're going to see, you know, a lot of interest from developers. And then it's important that we work with the City of Windsor because they are doing improvements on Banwell Road, just north of or the EC Row. As they come down and we go up, I think that's where we need to continue and foster that relationship to be able to have a long-term vision. So communicating with the City of Windsor planning staff is important so that year after year, both city and town can put money towards budget to whatever needs are so that we can connect Banwell Road and upgrade it to that safety standard that we expect as this land development arises. Thank you.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor, if I could, those are really valid comments. And as the secondary plan has evolved and the road network that's proposed in there has changed, it's changed in reflection of the Banwell EA that was undertaken by the city. And there really was a very good communication that took place between the city and the town and its team of consultants and our team of consultants. And as the mayor referenced earlier, we know we have rights of access by way of an agreement. And we have known connection points now because the EA and our engineering studies and traffic studies have identified those. And there is a clear understanding that, yeah, we'll have to have both at the administrative level and of course at the political level, some clear dialogue, you know, around mutual interests here and mutual benefit over time. So we are certainly very aware of that, and we'll continue to, you know, we'll strive to ensure that we are always in communication with our partners in the city.
Just to the deputy mayor's comments as well, even in the agreement itself, it says very clearly that the city they've got a responsibility to fulfill the requirements on Banwell. It's been a little bit behind on their side as well, but the big piece is it's the expressway, and with an overpass, it's very expensive. We get that. So maybe as they encroach towards 22, and I think to your point, Deputy Mayor, I think it's important for us to have that conversation, in particular from the rail lines moving towards 22, or sorry, 22, which would make a lot of sense, you know, because of that realignment. So maybe, you know, to Mr. Hillman and Mr. Jeffries, and as well as Ms. Evans, maybe a conversation obviously with the city to see what their intentions are. But I think that's certainly a critical point. And what's important about Banwell as well, it's not only for moving for our residents as well, is that the Eastview planning area is critically dependent on having access to that road to the southern part of the county, because towards the employment lands. And with the hospital coming as well, that's going to be a critical piece, and no doubt. So I think I'd rather, you know, at some point start having those conversations. I think that's important. I believe I don't see him, but Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Worship. So just I did note Mr. Hillman's comments from earlier that some of the queries I had from earlier will be addressed as part of the process. So I'll just ask one tonight, and it has to do with the transportation objectives of the former Tecumseh official plan. Arguably the two, if not three, of the points of the five in that official plan, the previous one, spoke to correcting the jog that exists at Little River near Lesbronts, where Wood Street is present to the south. And so certainly the previous town of Tecumseh, pre-amalgamation, thought this was very important to resolve. And it does not appear as if this language is present in the next document. And further, the schedules don't really show Wood Street being updated either to accommodate the bicycle lanes and other active transportation facilities. So I was hoping to really understand a little bit of what's being proposed, if anything, or if it's being withdrawn, the reasons for that, given how important this issue was to the previous town of Tecumseh Council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Dowie. Yes, so I guess as a starting point, and Chad, if well, we can leave it on this map because the lotting fabric actually is quite easy to see there. I think one of the things to be mindful of, maybe two things. One, the official plan is, we have a number of policy documents that are in front of us as the official plan is prepared. And we were using the transportation master plan that was recently completed, maybe a couple of years ago. And the mapping that we have for our road hierarchy is coming out of that document. And it looked at what, what makes up the town's hierarchy of arterial, collector, and local roads. And that document had not considered that continuation through between L'Esperance, where Little River just has it just sort of stops when you go east of L'Esperance. There's one block. And so we carried that forward in the official plan. That's not to say that we can't time out here for a minute and make sure that that is the right decision to make. And the second thing I would just observe, in the Tecumseh official plan, it is the transportation network. When you look at the mapping there, you'll see that it was identifying a number of collector roads and so on. And it is through areas that actually were not at the time developed. So, but this area just east of L'Esperance would have been developed, that block network. But Little River Boulevard generally, as a road was not existing. That's really sort of post 1980s era development, a good chunk of it anyways. And I think at the time, as when you have a clean slate and undeveloped lands, you start making connections through on your transportation network. And I suspect that was a major drive to get that east-west corridor. The question becomes, although it still has collector status, does the road need to go through to maintain a viable transportation network? Or can it function as an adequate level of service in its current form as it ultimately was developed? So I think that's the second part to this, is we probably should time out and just try and understand the transportation master plan. What was the thinking behind it when it came up with this solution? And it basically accepted that there's a gap in the system. That's not to say that it needs to be a gap. It may be that the town is desirous of continuing a road through, purchasing those lots and punching the road through. The question becomes, is it necessary at this point, now that the lands have fundamentally developed? And again, we were relying on the transportation master plan that was basically not showing that need was there. So I think the answer will be, we should look at that and try and come to a conclusion on it.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that very much.
Councilor Jobin. Go ahead.
Well, good evening through Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you, everybody. I do have a few things that jump up and we have discussed over the years. So the town property at Highway 3, there used to be discussion of the greenway connecting over to the parkette to allow for pedestrian access to cross over Highway 3 to connect to all the linkage of the greenway. But now you're showing that those lands are going to be of a new use, where the Highway 3 you were talking about earlier.
Okay.
I wrote it down, but I wrote so many things down. So it's changing its use now to an industrial zone?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Two things there. I think what I heard you saying was, how do we connect the Chrysler Canada Greenway north and south across Highway 3? Mm-hmm. That's not affected in any way by this land use plan. There still is an ongoing question when the Greenway originally was put across Highway 3. When I say put across, the rails were converted. There was a standing question from the Ministry of Transportation as to how it was intended people were to get across that highway. That question still exists today. And what the Ministry of Transportation has made clear is they do not want people crossing Highway 3 just at the end of Old Castle Road. And one of the things that's still in the works is, how do we get people from north of Highway 3 who can use the the greenway that's just tucked behind the Chicharo Club, and you can make your way down through the fire hall, through to the nice parquet. How do we get people from there to cross? And the MTO has indicated their preference is that people cross at the signalized intersection at Walker Road.
Right.
And then we have to figure out how do we get people from there down to the greenway, which, as you know, extends east and west over to LaSalle along that corridor there. So that's a standing question. And it is one that I think has been ongoing with the Conservation Authority, who is the driver behind the greenway. We have a significant interest in seeing that resolved. As it relates to the change in designation on the town's land, it does not impact the solution that might be available. And there may be any number of solutions. Certainly funding will be an issue of what is ultimately constructed, I suspect, because it may be that an overpass or an underpass may be the best solution, but it has to be resolved in a way that someone's funding it. So the land that we're looking at, where the little star is that Chad has placed there, that's the surplus land the town has, and it was Sandwich South lands. There's a small yard that the town has at the north end. And in fact, there used to be a package plant there, and Essex Power is just situated to the east of it. That is currently identified as community facility, and it is farmed. It's zoned agricultural. So a number of inquiries have come into the town for use. Could it be used for commercial land uses? The town still owns it, but the proposal was that it become a commercial, which is the red color just south of the star that Chad has there. Chad, can you just put it down on the yeah, there we go.
So there's no reason that we have to.
No, we are doing that as a consideration for council. A number of inquiries have been made that would like to have commercial use. It seems suitable for the site. The problem becomes when people go to purchase land, it then has to go through a planning process, and that creates delays for potential purchasers in the development of the land. So we're just putting it on the table as a consideration for council that it could be put into a commercial designation.
Yeah, Brian, I think, yeah, you know, the town doesn't own all of that red.
No.
Because I think that's confusing a little bit. There's, I know that there's a commercial node right at the corner that's privately owned.
Yeah.
And then there's Essex Power is next to, yeah, right there.
Yeah. So yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. What we're speaking to is the irregular shaped piece that goes down to Highway 3. It goes over to the Walker Road, and it goes just behind the fire hall. It's a, I don't know what to call that shape. It's kind of a rectangle, but
it's kind of a puzzle piece.
Yeah, it is. Or a, yeah.
Okay. So that, okay, so that needs some creative discussion, I think. As you know, with the Old Castle secondary plan, residents want to see more residential development, and that really does butt up right into those backyards. I do know it's a different pie that we're talking about, but anyways, more discussion on that, I think, is necessary. Maybe even just between you and I, we'll have more discussion on some of the uses there.
Sure.
Secondly, like, so we often discuss, we're talking about second dwelling units, diverse housing for aging population. And now for the, it's happened a few years ago, the removal of the retirement lots for our aging farming community. So really what I'm coming across, and I know it's all a more provincial policy, but even seniors, a healthy 60-year-old still wants to farm, and they have a 100-year-old farmhouse, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, full basement. They want to sever their home, still farm their farm as a cash income or as an income, and downsize to an apartment and maybe be a snowbird as well. That's not easily done for them. And I just find it to be, you know, unfair that, you know, we're trying to come up with these systems and policies and opportunities for our other aging residents, but a farming aging doesn't really have many options. They basically have to sell their whole farm, just forget it. And they rely on that crop as an income. Some maybe as a secondary, yes, but it's still an income that they're relying on, and they can't just sever their house and move away. What what do we see happening for that, for them?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Jobin. It is very limited, actually, what the municipality has available to it for options in this area. The province has, over the last maybe 15 years, 20 to 15 years, made it a very clear priority and has made it a conscious effort to introduce policies that limit, well, let's back up, really to protect the agricultural resource, okay? And so what they've done is they've structured a policy environment where it's quite difficult to do almost any form of land severance now in the agricultural area. And so the retirement lot concept that had been in place really since the 1970s with the food land guidelines, and it progressed through different policy environments. The retirement lots were removed as an option for a severance. So the province has really made it clear that you can take a large farm and divide it. You can, if you are a farmer and there is a move to larger farmer operations and you own multiple farms where there's houses on those, you can sever those. But they've gone to the point of making it so restrictive that if you sever a house off that's surplus to your needs, that the balance of the lands that would be vacant, that they need to be protected against a house being constructed on them. So that's a measure of the detail of policy that the province has introduced as a means to protect the resource. And I appreciate that it is a very challenging circumstance. In the case, as farmers are aging, to stay in place is very difficult under that scenario. And it really causes, other than if you have multiple farms, the reality of having to move out of home in those circumstances. And the challenge is with the provincial policy regime that we have, there is not a lot of latitude in terms of creating severance policies in the agricultural area. And that's,
If you
that's
remember,
the challenge.
Brian, just I forget how many years ago, really not that long ago, where they gave kind of a moratorium, not a moratorium, but they basically said you've got in the next year, whatever lands you want to sever. If you recall, there was a big rush at that particular time. And once that date was passed, that was it. It was, you couldn't sever any more lands.
Yeah, I think that through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there was a change sort of forecast signaled by the province that there's a change coming down the pipe. And I can't quite remember which era of government it was, but it's very interesting. It's
the Liberal government. Was it
one of the Liberals? Okay. And the scale has slowly been sliding towards fewer and fewer opportunities to break up the farmland. And, there's only so many ways you can protect a resource. And as everyone appreciates, I know agricultural land is a limited resource. But I know there's a high degree of frustration in the farm community around this. But I know there are different views too around it. We've spoken to the local agricultural association.
There was a lot of discussions, Brian, at the county level at the time as well. That they wanted to maintain that 100 acres, and so if you had 75 or anything of that nature, and you wanted to sever, the only way you could do is add it to another component to another farm. But you couldn't sever, you couldn't cut that farm down whatsoever unless you were adding it to existing. So I know there was arguments at the county level where they were trying because of I shouldn't say hobby farms, but because of orchards and wineries, the vines. Nobody has a 100-acre apple farm. I mean, it's impossible, but that was turned down. The province was kind of frowning upon that. And then county council of the day basically said, no, 100 acres is going to be the benchmark now if you sell. And then the province is really adamant on this severing of the lands.
Okay, thank you.
So it's out of our hands, really.
Yeah.
provincial
Thank you.
policy. Anything further? If not, then I'll move to a motion that the Planning and Building Services Report, the PBS 2020-35, Town of Tecumseh, new official plan draft of September 2020 be received as presented this evening. Deputy Mayor Becchetti, Councillor Jobin. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Before I call adjournment, I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of all of us and thank you, Mr. Hillman and Mr. Jeffries. I think that, you know, as much as we've had this conversation for a couple of hours, I'm sure you've worked maybe a little bit slightly more than 2 hours. You've been working diligently on this for months on end and probably the last couple of years. And thank you on behalf of all of us to not only bring it to the standard, but looking at issues I think that have really come to bear, the pressure come to bear to us on the flood, you know, issues that are and shown in the flood mapping that's there, and bringing us not only to, you know, today, but for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years into the future. And so I know it's taken a lot of work, and thank you, both of you, your departments, Margaret, you know, as well as all staff that have put into it, and looking forward to the discussion with our residents and council in finalizing this document, because I know most of us around the table have been anxiously waiting, you know, to bring this document up to 2021. Or, you know, and I'm saying 2021 because at the end of the day, that's when it's going to take, you know, pretty much effect and so forth. So thank you to all, you know, for the work. Adjournment's in order if there's nothing further. So Councillor Houston and Councillor Dowie, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. So thank you, members of council. And until we meet again, and also to the if there are people that are streaming and watching the proceedings, we bid you good evening, and until next time, stay safe.
Bye-bye. Good night.